You ever read something that's, well, just so cynical, so biting that you feel like you should disagree with it, but you just can't? The argument is so perfectly put together, it just feels like the undeniable truth. Today, we're going to deconstruct exactly how one of the 20th century's masters of persuasion, H.L. Mencken, pulls that off. All right, let's dive in. So, Mencken doesn't ease you into his argument. Nope. He starts with an absolute knockout punch like this: frauds and fanatics, poltroons and scoundrels. I mean, the language is so precise, so rhythmic, and just so utterly damning. It immediately sets this tone of complete and total contempt for the political process. And that really brings us to our central question. It's easy to just dismiss this as, bitter complaining, but Mencken's writing is incredibly persuasive. So we're going to peel back the layers and look at the engine inside the argument, the rhetorical machinery that makes it so darn powerful. To really get how he's so convincing, we've got to first understand his core claim. So part one, what he calls democracy's eternal tragedy. And it's a completely counterintuitive idea that's all about the punishment of virtue. So here's the crucial point. Mencken argues that the average person, or the mob as he puts it, just can't wrap their head around the idea of selfless public service. I mean, since they can't imagine acting without some kind of self-interest, they just assume no one else can either. And this really lays out that central conflict perfectly. On one side, you've got the rare, honest politician who's actually trying to do some good. On the other side, you've got the public, who just immediately assumes he's corrupt. The great irony, for Mencken, is that the honest guy suffers more from this than the actual crook, because the crook already knows how to play the game of public perception. Okay, so let's move on to our second point and see how he builds on this. Because right when he's laying out this abstract political theory, Mencken does something fascinating. He takes off the satirist's mask and makes the whole argument intensely personal. Now, what's really interesting here is the shift. He stops talking about the honest man in some abstract third-person way and starts talking about himself. That one little word, myself, is a totally calculated rhetorical move. He's switching from being an analyst to being a first-person witness. And you can literally feel the entire emotional temperature of the writing just change. You know that detached kind of amused tone he's famous for? Poof, it just evaporates. And in its place is this cold, controlled indignation. The argument suddenly feels way less like a funny observation and more like urgent personal testimony. And here's why. He starts listing these absurd accusations thrown at him for his work: that he was paid by brewers to oppose prohibition, or that he was a secret agent for the Vatican. I mean, come on. By showing us this, he's not just complaining. He's making his abstract point totally concrete. It's like he's saying, see, this is what happens when you try to speak honestly. The mob can only imagine a corrupt motive. Okay, so now that he's laid out his core claim and made it personal, let's look at the actual tools he uses to build his case with such incredible precision. This is where we get into the mechanics of his genius. And it's super important because these same tools are absolutely still used today to make arguments feel true, whether they are or not. First off, his word choice is just surgical. He uses legal and medical terms to make it sound like he's not just criticizing democracy, he's diagnosing its pathological flaws. He'll pit a word like rectitude, pure moral uprightness, against the messy reality of political necessity. And then he'll just drop in a German word like Katzenjammer, which literally means a cat's wail, like a hangover, to describe the entire post-war national mood with one perfect, slightly defiant term. Another key tool is his sentence structure, especially something called the periodic sentence. It's a brilliant little device for building suspense. The sentence just winds up, clause after clause, holding back the main point until the very, very end for maximum impact. Just listen to this masterpiece of a sentence describing a politician. His backbone has a sweet resiliency. He knows how to clap on false whiskers. It is quite impossible to forecast his action without knowing what rewards are offered by the rival sides. You see how it builds. First, that sweet resiliency. Basically, he's spineless. Then, the false whiskers. He's a performer. Those semicolons are like a drumroll, building and building until that final devastating punchline. You can't predict him based on principle, only by who's paying him. But Mencken's most lethal weapon, for sure, is the epigram. This is where he can distill an entire complex argument down into one single, unforgettable sentence, that just lands like a judge's verdict.
So, an epigram is basically persuasion in its densest form. It's short, it's sharp, and it's clever. And the best ones, like Mencken's, they have this quality of a proverb. They sound so perfectly constructed that it feels like they must have always been true.
And here is a classic example. An entire critique of American journalism, its fawning praise for mediocre politicians, and its hostility to revolutionary ideas is all captured in just 24 perfectly balanced words. It's just devastating. Let's really break down the anatomy of this thing. First, you've got the numbers, 1 million and 500,000. Now, they're obviously over the top, but that 2-to-1 ratio gives the attack this feeling of precision. Second, the memes. He contrasts Coolidge, a pretty mediocre president, with Darwin, a revolutionary scientist. It's the ultimate juxtaposition of the mundane and the monumental. And finally, you have the compression and the rhythm. The whole critique is just 24 words, and its parallel structure gives it that balanced, almost proverbial quality. Every single piece is working together to deliver that knockout blow. So we've seen how he does it, but for our final point, we need to add one last really crucial layer. We have to ask if the man presenting this argument, this disinterested truth teller, is actually who he says he is. And here is the ultimate twist. The image Mencken projects of himself, this lone, honest critic being unfairly attacked by the ignorant masses, is itself a rhetorical construction. It's a persona, right? A character he creates to make his argument even more persuasive. It's all designed to make you side with him against all the fools out there. And this is why all of this really matters. The great danger of this kind of masterful rhetoric, especially the epigram, is that it can make something sound so true, so inevitable, that we don't even stop to ask if it actually is true. A perfectly crafted sentence can feel way more powerful than a messy, complicated fact. So, I'll leave you with this question. The next time you hear an argument, a political soundbite, or an advertising slogan that just sounds perfect, stop and ask yourself, is this powerful because it's true, or is it just perfectly, persuasively, and maybe, just maybe, deceptively phrased?